There was once a young man named Elias who often dreamed of changing his life. He read books like The Alchemist and Atomic Habits, and each time he felt inspired. But after a few days of excitement, he always slipped back into old ways. His notebooks filled with plans, but none of them lasted. One morning, after another night of staying up too late and sleeping past his alarm, Elias sat by the window feeling tired of himself. He whispered, "If I keep living like this, nothing will ever change." That quiet thought stayed with him. The next day he decided to do something different, not grand or dramatic, just small. He chose to wake up at the same time each morning and spend 10 minutes writing in his journal. It seemed too little to matter, but he promised himself he would not miss a day. At first, it was hard. His bed was warm, and the world outside felt heavy, but the act of keeping his promise made him feel a spark of pride. After a week, he noticed his thoughts becoming clearer. After 2 weeks, the blank pages of his journal were filling with ideas he never knew he had. Months passed. He added other small habits, walking each evening, reading a few pages before bed, setting aside coins in a jar to save money. None of it looked impressive on its own, but the pattern of showing up every day began to shape him in ways no single burst of inspiration ever had. Sometimes he missed a day. Sometimes he felt tired or unmotivated, but he learned not to quit just because he stumbled. Instead, he returned the next day. He realized that mistakes were not the end. They were simply part of the path. Slowly, his friends noticed. They saw Elias calmer, stronger, and more reliable than before. When they asked what had changed, he smiled and said, "Nothing all at once. Just the same little things, every day." Years later, Elias looked back and saw how those tiny choices had built a new life. He was not perfect, nor did he need to be. What mattered was that he had kept moving forward, step by step. And so the lesson of his story was simple. Consistency may not feel powerful in the moment, but over time, it has the strength to change everything. Small steps done regularly can create big change. Imagine planting a single seed in the soil. At first it looks so small that it seems almost impossible that it could ever turn into something meaningful. You water it today, and tomorrow nothing appears different. You keep watering, and still, for weeks, there is only bare soil. Most people give up in this stage, thinking their effort is wasted. But those who keep going eventually see a green sprout push through the earth. That sprout, with time and care, becomes a tree. Life works the same way. When you commit to one small action every day, like reading a page of a book, walking for 10 minutes, or practicing a new word in English, you may feel as though nothing is happening. But beneath the surface, your mind, your habits, and even your character are changing. What looks invisible today becomes visible tomorrow. Over weeks and months, those small actions gather strength, linking together like tiny drops of water filling a jar. The truth is, most transformations are not sudden. They are built quietly through steady effort. A single workout does not make you fit, but repeated workouts shape your body. Writing one page will not give you a book, but writing every day will create a story you never thought you could finish. Speaking a few sentences in English may feel clumsy at first, but practicing daily can turn broken words into fluent conversation. The beauty of small steps is that they do not overwhelm you. They are easy enough to do, yet powerful enough to build momentum. And once momentum begins, it carries you forward in ways you could never imagine at the start. Would you like me to expand each of the remaining 8 keynotes in the same storytelling style so the whole piece becomes a full-length inspirational narrative? Consistency builds trust with yourself and others. When Elias first began his journey, he didn't realize how much his promises mattered. In the past, he had made many plans: wake up early, exercise, write, save money. But each time he broke those promises, he lost a little trust in himself. Deep down, he began to believe his own words didn't hold weight. And when you stop trusting yourself, you start to doubt everything you try to do. But something shifted the moment he began keeping even the smallest promises. Waking up at the same time, writing for just 10 minutes, saving a little each week, these actions seemed ordinary, yet they quietly rebuilt the bridge between his words and his actions. Each day he showed up, he proved to himself, "I can rely on me." That quiet trust was more valuable than motivation because it gave him confidence that tomorrow he could show up again. Others began to notice too. Friends who once doubted his commitments started to see a new pattern. When he said he would meet them for a walk, he showed up on time. When he promised to help, he followed through. His consistency became a kind of unspoken language, telling others, "You can depend on me." And trust, once built, opened doors, new friendships, opportunities, and respect. In the end, Elias discovered that consistency was not only about achieving personal goals, it was about creating a foundation of trust, first within himself and then with the world around him. And that trust became a light that carried him through challenges far greater than he had ever imagined. Discipline often begins with simple daily actions. Elias used to believe discipline meant something harsh, like pushing yourself through endless hours of work or giving up every comfort. Because of this, he avoided the word altogether, thinking it belonged only to soldiers or monks. But slowly, he realized discipline could be something gentle, built from ordinary choices made every single day. It started when he decided to make his bed each morning. At first, it seemed pointless, just a blanket pulled tight and pillows set in place. Yet that tiny act gave him a sense of order, a message to his mind that the day had truly begun. From there, he added another action, preparing his journal and writing before breakfast. None of these things were extraordinary, but together they gave his mornings a rhythm, a kind of quiet structure that shaped the rest of his day. What Elias discovered was that discipline did not suddenly appear in moments of great need. Instead, it was grown in small, ordinary tasks that trained his mind and body to follow through. When he practiced these little acts of order, he became stronger in facing bigger challenges, skipping distractions to focus on work, resisting the urge to quit halfway, or staying calm when things went wrong. All of it became easier because his daily actions had already prepared him. He realized discipline was not about denying life's joys, but about guiding his energy in the right direction. It was less about force and more about choice, and over time, those choices shaped his character, teaching him that true freedom came not from doing whatever he wanted, but from building habits that carried him toward the life he truly desired. Progress is usually slow at first, but grows over time. Elias remembered how, in the beginning, his efforts felt invisible. He wrote in his journal every morning, but when he looked back after a week, the pages were still few. He went for evening walks, yet his body felt no stronger, no different. He read a few pages of a book each night, but the stack of finished books never seemed to grow. Doubt whispered to him, "Is this really worth it?" But he kept going. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Slowly, the pages in his journal became a collection of thoughts and reflections that revealed patterns in his life. His walks, once tiring, began to feel lighter, his steps more steady. The pile of books he finished grew taller, each one adding a new idea, a new perspective. What once felt like nothing began to look like real change. It was like watching the seasons. At first, the tree seems bare, lifeless under the winter sky, but hidden beneath the cold, roots are growing deeper, preparing for spring. One day, almost without noticing, small green leaves appear, and then the tree is alive with color. Progress works the same way. It often hides beneath the surface before it bursts into view. Elias learned that impatience was the enemy of growth. He had once believed change should happen quickly, as it does in stories or films, but real life had a different rhythm. The slow, steady effort was what gave results their strength. And when he finally saw how far he had come, he realized the delay was never a waste. It was the very thing that made the progress last. Mistakes do not erase effort if you return to the path. Elias discovered this truth the hard way. One evening, after weeks of keeping his promises, he skipped his walk. He told himself he was too tired and that missing one day would not matter, but one day turned into two, then three. The old voice of doubt returned, whispering, "You failed again. Why bother starting over?" For a moment, he felt the weight of shame pressing on him. In the past, this was the point where he would give up entirely, throwing away all the progress he had made. But this time, he chose something different. He reminded himself that missing a few steps did not mean the journey was over. The path was still waiting, and he could return to it at any time. So the next morning, he put on his shoes and walked again. The air felt fresh, his body lighter, and though the break had slowed his rhythm, it had not erased the strength he had already built. In fact, the simple act of coming back made him stronger than before, because it proved he could rise after stumbling. Elias realized mistakes were not signs of weakness, but reminders that he was human. What mattered most was not avoiding every failure, but refusing to let failure have the final word. He saw that consistency was not about being perfect. It was about choosing to return again and again, no matter how many times he drifted off course. That choice, more than anything else, was what kept his life moving forward. Motivation may fade, but habits carry you forward. At the beginning of his journey, Elias often felt bursts of excitement. A new book, a fresh idea, or an inspiring story could fill him with energy, making him believe he could change everything overnight. But as the days passed, that fire slowly dimmed. Waking up early felt heavy again, writing seemed dull, and his evening walks lost their spark. He realized that motivation, no matter how strong, could not be trusted to last. In the past, this was when Elias would quit. He thought the fading of excitement meant he had lost his chance. But now, with small habits already in place, he discovered something different. Even when he did not feel inspired, he still knew how to show up. His body rose when the alarm rang because it had learned the rhythm of mornings. His hand reached for the journal because it had become part of the day, like brushing his teeth. It was not passion that carried him forward in these moments, but the quiet strength of habit. He came to see habits as invisible rails, guiding him even when his feelings wandered. Some days he still felt tired, distracted, or unmotivated. But the beauty of habit was that it did not ask him to feel ready, it only asked him to act. And so Elias learned that motivation was like a spark, useful for starting the fire. But it was habit that kept the flame alive through long nights and cold seasons. This truth freed him from waiting for the perfect mood or the perfect moment. He realized that progress did not belong to those who felt inspired every day, but to those who kept going, even when they didn't. Patience is essential, since growth cannot be rushed. Elias often wished change would come faster. He wanted his writing to improve in weeks, his body to grow stronger in days, his savings jar to fill overnight. Each time he looked for quick results, he felt frustration rise, as if life was holding something back from him. One evening, while sitting in the park after his walk, he watched an old gardener planting flowers. The man dug carefully, pressed seeds into the soil, covered them, and watered them. Elias asked him how long it would take before the flowers bloomed. The gardener smiled and said, "As long as they need. My job is not to force them, only to care for them." That simple answer stayed with Elias. He realized that growth followed its own quiet rhythm. No matter how much water you pour, the seed will not bloom tomorrow. No matter how much you demand, your body will not transform in a single week. True progress takes time, and the only way to reach it is through patience. Elias began to see patience not as waiting helplessly, but as trusting the process. Each journal entry, each walk, each saved coin was like watering the seed. The results were hidden for a while, but he knew something was happening beneath the surface. When the first signs of change appeared, they felt even more powerful because they had been earned slowly. In learning patience, Elias freed himself from the pressure of instant success. He stopped chasing quick fixes and instead built a steady life, one step at a time. And with patience, he discovered a deep truth. What grows slowly often lasts the longest. What feels ordinary today may become extraordinary later. Elias often thought his daily actions were too small to matter. Writing a single page, walking a few steps, saving a single coin, it all felt so ordinary, almost invisible. There were no fireworks, no sudden breakthroughs, just quiet repetition. At times he even wondered, will this ever amount to anything? But as the months stretched on, those ordinary acts began to reveal their hidden power. One morning, he opened his journal and found hundreds of pages filled with his own words, ideas, reflections, and lessons that painted the story of his growth. What had started as 10 minutes of scribbling now looked like the beginnings of a book. The same was true for his walks. At first, they felt like nothing more than short strolls, yet over time his body grew stronger, his breath steadier, and his mind calmer. What once seemed like casual steps had become a source of health and clarity, and the small coins he dropped into his jar, almost laughable at first, had gathered into enough to buy something meaningful, proving that even the smallest effort could grow into real change. Elias realized that ordinary actions are seeds of the extraordinary. The world often praises sudden success, but the quiet victories are the ones that shape a lasting life. What looks unimpressive today may, with time, become the very thing that defines your future. And so he kept going, trusting that even the most ordinary act repeated with faith could carry the power to transform everything. A consistent life can inspire others more than words alone. Elias never set out to become an example for anyone. He was simply trying to keep his own promises, to build a life he could trust. But over time, people around him began to notice. His friends saw how he no longer drifted aimlessly, but carried a steady rhythm in his days. His family noticed how he became calmer, more dependable, more present. Even strangers at the park saw him walking each evening, rain or shine, and some began walking too, quietly encouraged by his persistence. What surprised Elias most was that he rarely spoke about his changes. He did not give long speeches about discipline or consistency. Instead, his actions did the speaking. The quiet act of showing up day after day sent a message far stronger than advice ever could. Change is possible, and it begins small. One of his younger cousins once told him, "I started journaling because I saw you doing it every morning." A friend said, "Watching you keep walking every evening made me start walking too." Elias realized that his consistency had become a light, not only guiding his own path, but also brightening the way for others. He understood then that true influence is not built in a moment of grand performance, but in the steady choices repeated over time. A consistent life, lived quietly and faithfully, can ripple outward and touch countless others, often in ways we never see. And so Elias continued, not for recognition, but because he knew each small step mattered, both for himself and for those silently watching.